Thanks for having me. I'm very glad for the opportunity to meet you. I don't know why, but in our department, we professors don't get to meet students that often. So we used to have seminars and all that before the pandemic. So we got together a bit and did stuff together, but not so much now. Maybe I see some of you in the hallway passing through, and then with the masks, it's difficult for me to, sometimes a little bit of a high, but if you see me, and something here is interesting for you, then do stop me, do say hi, do come and talk to me. I want to get to know you, especially when it comes to research, graduate students, postgraduate. It's very important for you to get to know the faculty and know what they're doing, maybe hear a little bit about what's happening in science. Before I share some of this with you, just by show of hands, how many of you heard of this science reform movement? A little bit, yes? In which context, which class? Where did you hear about this? Somewhere? Yeah, go ahead. What? Okay, great. For mentors, yeah, some classes maybe? Supervisors, mainly? It's great. We came to a point where supervisors are talking about science reform. So that's terrific. So perhaps some of these things are going to be slightly familiar for you. I just want to say we're recording this. Almost everything that I do, I share on YouTube on the Open Science Framework, which I hope that you're using. So if you want to go back later and listen to some of these things, you can. If you want to hear about other topics, please go ahead and check out the YouTube. Lots of information over there about open science, meta research, research methods, and all of that. I don't think you need a reminder that we're facing some major challenges in the world right now. A third of Pakistan is underwater. Can you imagine the tragedy of having to face this kind of thing? And Pakistan is not a small country. So all sorts of things are happening. We're just starting to come out of a pandemic, basic issues with extreme weather, biodiversity loss, poverty around the world, all sorts of extreme things that we are about to head into. Plus the age of misinformation, political instability in all sorts of places in the world, debt crisis, inflation, and also, so a lot of uncertainty. It's not the first time since I'm alive that this is happening. There's all sorts of like ups and downs. So hopefully this will find its way back, but it's up to us to try and use our role as social scientists in order to try and help this a little bit. And the main question is, we want to have scientific solutions for some of these urgent problems. How is science doing? How can we use science better for that? So this is one of the largest scientific projects to come out of, let's say, biology or the science reform movement. Started a long time ago in the attempt to reproduce and replicate many findings in biology. Cancer biology. So this is cancer research. It's a little bit outside of our domain. And you can see that they started with 193 experiments. It's a little bit small. So trust me that this is what it says. Out of that, they were only able to start with 87 experiments. Out of that, they completed 50 experiments. And the question is, how many of these 50 experiments were they able to replicate? So reproduction was a problem because I don't know how you feel about reading the research methods sections of the articles, but it's very, very difficult, even in psychology. What did they do? What was the scale? How did they make that kind of analysis? We don't really know because it's very, very brief. We don't have any kind of information. Just imagine cancer biology. You need all the protocol, and then you contact the authors and say, can you tell us what happened here? So this was a long time ago, so we don't really remember. We don't know. This is proprietary. We don't want to share this with you. So out of 193, only 50 started. This is a summary from one of the people in the science reform movement that is working very hard on open science and open access. This is his summary. Started in 2013, let's try and replicate. 2018, oh, sorry, we can only start with 50 of them, and then finally the end result is 5 out of the 50 or the 18 is full replication, 7 partial replication, 2 out of the 18 not interpretable, 4 out of the 18 not reproducible. So the bottom line result of this is that we're in a very bad situation in cancer biology. We're not talking about social sciences or psychology. We're talking about what is considered to be a hard science, an exact science, medical biology. How big are these issues? Turns out that this is very, very big. It's all across the disciplines in many places in science around the different domains. So you can see over here that since 2015, I started tracking this. Social psychology was a little bit early to that. We started doing this in 2012. 2015, a big article came out in social psychology. And since then, I've been tracking this since my postdoc, looking at this. And then suddenly all these headlines start coming out. And I really think that every talk at HKU talking about science needs to start from this slide. So we have a problem that is not limited to psychology, because in medicine, the science has stopped working. In chemical research, in cancer research, just showed you the latest finding from a few months ago. Economics, if you think something that's closer to math doesn't have this problem, so it does. Empirical computer science, quantum computing, physics. So we have all these issues across the different domains, and we need to start paying attention to this, because if it comes across again and again throughout the different fields of science, then perhaps there's a larger thing that's going on. This is a summary of what's happening in the social sciences. So Brian Nosek is the director of the Center of Open Science, and he directed many of the mass replication efforts, where we said we're going to take classic articles in psychological science and try to replicate them again and again. So he did this with many labs, many places around the world. This is Many Labs 1, ML1, Many Labs 2, Many Labs 3. And finally, I think the one that made the big news is the Science article. So it doesn't happen often that social psychologists publish in Science, but this is 100 replications of classics in psychological science, JPSP, and so forth. Other attempts trying to replicate findings in Nature and Science. So people saying those top journals, these high impact factors, Science and Nature, they are the ones that are going to have high replication rates. Not necessarily so, so 13 out of the 21. Over here, Many Labs 2, 14 out of 28. So all these together, the replication rate seems to be about 47%. And these are our top journals. In the ones that replicate, the effect size, the impact of the manipulation, seems to be about half of what was originally found. This is my summary. It's an unofficial summary, but I've been tracking this for a very long time. At least in social psychology, our replication rate is about 30 to 50%. And in what replicates, the effect size seems to be about half of the original. I don't know how you think about this, but to me, this is very troubling. And this is about our top findings that we wanted to go and revisit. If you see findings from cancer biology, rates of 8 out of 50 out of 193, then we're in a serious situation that deserves our attention. And I want to discuss with you a little bit why this is happening, hopefully influencing a little bit of your career and your choices about how you want to approach science and what you want to do as a psychological scientist. One of the first challenges, and I think you're already feeling this right now, is we have misaligned incentives. We have incentives right now by HKU, by the system, the promotion system, the hiring system, just to get into an MPhil, just to get into a PhD. You need to show publications. You need to show publications in high impact factor journals. So you have all these incentives, and you have very strained researchers that don't have time to do things slowly, deliberately, to carefully check what it is that they're doing. So there's this strain pulling in different directions. You want to impress. You want to do something novel. You want to do something that's groundbreaking. You want to do this now. You want to do this yesterday. You need to move fast, fast, fast. You need to deliver all the time. So rather than caring about accuracy, what you care about is actually delivering groundbreaking, amazing results. I'll give you an example from hiring. We face this all the time at HKU. I'll give you an example of two researchers. Let's say that you have two candidates. So these candidates have exactly the same resources. So let's say me and Xiaoqing, we get to HKU. They give us 2,000 participants. There's, let's say, 50% a priority true hypothesis. We have comparable research designs. We do about the same things in, let's say, the domain of judgment decision making. And we have a typical effect size of about D equals 0.5, which is, I have to say, larger than the average effects that we usually get. And let's assume that both me and Xiaoqing don't do any p-hacking. During the last 5 years, Xiaoqing is a lot more prolific than I am. So he published 33 statistically significant papers, and I published 21 statistically significant papers. Who is going to be hired for that position? So which is the preferable candidate? A. How many of you say A? A. How many of you say B? Okay. So obviously there's a trick here. What is it that we're ignoring? What is it that we're not taking into consideration? Power. What is the problem with power? So if we have exactly the same resources, what that means is that in order to get these 33 statistically significant results, the conditions have much smaller samples. So 25 per condition. Candidate B has a lot more, 100 per condition. How does this impact the validity, the replicability of the results? So if you do a very basic analysis, and hopefully you get to learn how to do power analysis and then a sensitivity analysis in order to see which one is more valid, you'll see that candidate A that has a 25 per condition has a 15% chance of false positives, and 25% of the results can be replicated in exact replication. However, candidate B that invested a little bit more of the resources in getting larger samples has a lower false positive rate of 6%, and 76% of the results can be replicated in exact replication. So already we're seeing that the emphasis on how many papers are published is not necessarily the right criteria. When you look at the papers, you want to see what are the practices that are employed in that paper. Is the science valid? Not the number of papers on how many high impact factors journal you get yourself into, but whether how things were accomplished in there. A little bit about impact factors. I don't know if you're aware of how impact factors work, but it's a product. There's nothing valid about impact factors. It's something that's made up. There is a bit of a metric in it, but actually it's negotiable. You can negotiate your impact factor. There's a way to calculate it. From where do you calculate 2 years? What is included in these 2 years or not? First few included, not included. And it seems like a lot of journals, high impact journals, push back on this and negotiate this sort of thing. If you want an excellent talk about why impact factors are completely invalid, you can go and have a look. This is James Heathers, who is considered to be a big voice in the open science movement. One of the biggest challenges, we're not going to solve this anytime soon, it seems, is the problem with parasites that we have in the scientific community that have to do with for-profit publishers. It's amazing because you are our customers. You are the taxpayers. You pay my salary, Xiaoqing's salary. You pay for my funding. You pay the government. The government pays me to do my research, right? But at the end, what we do is that we conduct the research. We peer review each other. And then we submit this to the journal. Finally, the journal gives us acceptance. And they take this and they put this behind the paywall. And they ask you for more money to access the things that you already paid for. So this is, I think, a good example summary of the situation.
Hey, Christopher. Yeah, boss, what's up? What do you think about making some of our articles open access? That's a good idea. Make the articles free to the public so that anybody can appreciate the latest scientific advancements. I like it. Of course, the author would have to pay some kind of publishing fee. Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. What, like a couple $100? Yeah, I was thinking maybe $11,000. What? Yeah, $11,000, and we put your article on our website for anybody to read. Why so much? Oh, you know, all the costs. What costs? Reviewing the article? Yeah, we don't pay reviewers. We guilt them into it because it's good for science. Okay, what about formatting? Your 12-year-old niece does that for us. Well, we gotta publish it. That costs money. It's a PDF on a website. Kaylee does it in like 2 seconds. Kaylee? Your niece. Oh, yeah. Besides, who's going to be able to afford this? Oh, People will pay. Why? Because they have to. What do you mean? Researchers have to publish in order to keep their jobs or get promoted, and we're one of the most prestigious journals around. People will pay. So it's extortion. Here at Nature, we're doing crime. Oh, Christopher, don't be so dramatic. So let me get this straight. You want to charge researchers $11,000 to publish an open access article, thereby ensuring that only researchers with the most money get to publish an article, which defeats the purpose of having open access articles in the first place. Yeah, that's right. And this is guaranteed to be profitable because researchers' livelihoods are dependent on a predatory system that values publishing in high-impact journals. Hey, you got it. This, of course, is insane. It's academics, baby.
It's academics, baby. This is so sad. It makes us laugh, but this is so sad because this is our reality. You're walking into this reality. I feel this reality every day. I'm up for promotion, and I'm being measured for how much of high impact factor journals I'm able to publish in. So it was a major challenge for me. Do I participate in this kind of system? Do you know what I can do with $11,000? I can finance you instead of, giving this to a publisher that's going to pay the stakeholders of that company. There are some good news. The Europeans have been at it for a while, and they're doing all sorts of things with Plan S, which is controversial. I don't know what's going to come out of this. But just in the last 2 months, the US government woke up a little bit, and they're trying to do some change. It still remains to be seen how this is going to be implemented and to what extent. So for example, here the headlines, US government reveals big changes to open access policy, mandating that starting from 2026, everything has to be open access. So let's say that you are the publishers and you're sitting on this pile of money and you see this kind of reaction from the government. How do you react to this? So they were not too slow to react, and this is some of the response to this. So Nature Human Behavior, 9,500 euros. Just want to give you an example. I hope you don't mind that I take an example from you. A very important comment that I wanted to read that has to do with our regions. For example, promoting computational psychiatry in China. A big achievement for everybody who published this commentary in Nature Human Behavior. But finally, of course, to access this, if you want to read a commentary, it's a very small kind of note on how to do this. You need to pay 32, unless, of course, you're very privileged. You're part of the HKU community. And instead of you paying $32, the library pays millions in a pile of money that goes into Nature Human Behavior. Question is, do we want to participate in this? When we're participating in this, what does that mean? So the reaction from journals like Nature to what the government did.
Hey, boss, I got a Are you okay? Yes, Christopher. Why do you ask? You're ripping out pages of a journal. Yeah, because it's worthless, Christopher. Okay, what's going on? The government has decided that we can't make people pay for research that was funded by the government. That's a bad thing? Yes, the entire academic publishing business model is making taxpayers pay for things they've already paid for. But that's so unnecessary. There's no reason for that business model to exist. Of course it's unnecessary. Look, you don't get on the cover of Middleman Monthly by being necessary. What are my fellow middlemen gonna say when they hear I've been cut out? I don't know. That's the #1 rule of being a middleman. You don't get cut out. I'm so sorry. I don't think you mean that. No, I don't. We've been gatekeeping academic research for far too long. Things need to change. Oh, don't be dramatic. We don't gatekeep research. Yes, we do. You even named the company softball team the Gatekeepers. Well, if we can't profit off of publicly funded research, how are us lowly publishers supposed to make ends meet, Christopher? We make billions of dollars every year. I think we'll be okay. Yeah, for now. Within 5 years, our profit margins could go as low as Google. You know, this is a good thing for society. It gives the public more access to the latest scientific advancements. Well, I hope the public enjoys their free randomized controlled trials. because I am about to create open access fees that are so egregious. It'll make United Healthcare blush.
And we just sit silently and say that this is okay. Especially during a pandemic, when we want to have free dissemination, we have the whole world working together in order to find a cure for something that's very urgent. Having, this kind of, you need to pay a certain amount of money in order to access this is horrible. We are very fortunate in Hong Kong to be able to do this, but many places in the world are not able to. So I really think I don't see any benefits that they give. It's a parasitic model that we need to get rid of. And there are solutions to this. We're just not implementing this. And I've been trying at HKU to promote as much of this as possible to get rid of those, to move to Diamond Open Access where you don't need any fees in order to publish. We can do all this by ourselves as a community. But to get promoted, I need to show that I'm publishing high impact factors in Nature and paying whatever it is in order to get the open access kind of thing. There's also a lot of biases. Research and science are great. The problem is that it's done by us, by humans, and we have weaknesses. So we have all sorts of problems like outcome bias, confirmation bias, also publication bias, hindsight bias. So when you send your paper to reviewers, they don't evaluate you based on the science that you've done. They evaluate you based on the outcome. Is this innovative? Is the p-value lower than 0.05? Have you shown something that's new and wonderful? If you have null results and you didn't find anything, you've done a thesis in your PhD, you worked on something for 4 years, but you didn't have the p-value lower than 0.05, it's not worth anything. We can't publish this. But of course, this is a very big problem because even if something doesn't work, let's say a vaccine, you've done a trial, you've made sure that you've done everything along the way, the right way, the scientific way, and you found that the vaccine doesn't work. Should we know about this or not? Should this be published or not? Of course it should. Because if we have only this work, this work, this work, but for everyone that worked, you have 100 that didn't work, then we have a problem. We're using vaccines that are not working, right? Everything about the scientific model is broken right now because of the way that we've been doing science. So if you look at this, we start from generalizing hypothesis, we design a study, we collect data, we analyze data, we interpret data, then we publish or we conduct another experiment. For every one of these steps, we already know we have empirical data, scientific data showing us that something is very, very wrong. So lack of replication, only 1 in 1,000 papers ever gets replicated. Somebody back in the 1970s published something in your field, and since then, using a Princeton sample of 20, since then it's in our textbooks and everybody says this is how things are. We need to replicate again and again. First of all, not only Princeton, maybe we need to know if this is happening in Hong Kong on large samples. Something worked in the 1970s, it doesn't mean that it's going to work today. We need replications again and again, but only 1 in 1,000 gets replicated. Low statistical power. Up until 10 years ago, when I was doing my PhD, the average sample per condition was about 10 to 20. Now we understand we need larger samples, but everything that's been published has been published on very low samples, very low power. Questionable research practices, trying to push the p-value to be just below 0.05. Why? Because without 0.05, we can't publish this. So there's lots of evidence showing that people are doing these questionable research practices. They know what needs to be done in order to get the p-value just below the 0.05 to get this published. And then once you see the data, once you see the results, maybe it's not what you hypothesized. So you rewrite the entire paper as if this is what you hypothesized, even though your hypothesis was something completely different. This is called harking, hypothesizing after the results are known. So we're breaking this circle. We're going straight to the start by reinterpreting everything that we've done over here. There's a lot of problems how this is impacting research. I'm going to give you one case study. I have lots. I give lectures about this in advanced social psychology. Classic paper in priming. Perhaps you've heard of social priming. Rule and wire, this is the citation count over here. So take this from Google Scholar, I think this morning. You can see 2,400 and something citations. The question is, would this replicate? A lot of people have built on this, entire literatures. We're talking about hundreds of articles that have been layers and layers. There are books that published from so many different directions. I did social priming when I did my PhD, wanted to see how this works and to what extent. Couldn't get this to work. So because of all sorts of problematic issues, we decided to do a mass replication effort. Replication registered report. You see a big team over there, actually Bob Wire, who used to be at HKU marketing. I think he retired already, or he moved to Chinese University of Hong Kong. So he's a member of the Hong Kong community, very well known. When he came to Hong Kong, we thought this is amazing. His wife still works in HKU marketing. So he was involved in this, and he wanted to also help support this replication effort. At the end, you can see the big team. This is how we do big team science. A lot of people from the open science community, I know many of them. Finally, the end result of this is, although the confidence interval for one outcome excluded 0 and the observed effect was in the predicted direction, these results suggest that the currently used methods do not produce this kind of priming effect. So we found no support for this. Now, it's not only that we're not able to get this to replicate, but suddenly when they did this revisiting reproduction of the original articles, somebody noticed from a meta-analysis that when somebody coded this article, Sewell and Wire, they saw that the Cohen's d is a 5.65. So since the 1970s, until they did this mass replication effort in a meta-analysis, nobody cared that the Cohen's d is 5.65. What is the typical Cohen's d that we have in social psychology? Somewhere between 0.4, 0.5, that's already considered to be. In judgment decision making, sometimes we get to 0.8, we're very happy, right? 0.2, we already feel like we're doing, we have something. 5.6 is near impossible. This is a Twitter captures that I had. So somebody made the comparison to Shaq. I don't know if you know Shaquille O'Neal. Back in my day, he was a famous NBA player. So in effect of 5.65 is the comparison between Shaq and like the average female. So very, very large effect. This is almost impossible. Not almost. This is impossible in social psychology. And this is what's published. If you look at the F, look at these numbers. How come nobody noticed over all these years that there's a big problem here? It's not only this, but if you look at the figures, I used to look at this and say, oh my God, these are such good scientists. It's amazing how they were able to get these results. Now we know that these results are just impossible because this graph is too good. It's too good to be true. There has to be an error here. And Bob, because Bob Wire was involved in this, they actually asked him, what do you think about this? So you'll see all sorts of responses to this. Brian Nosek, did you look at the figures? If you look at the figures, you see that something is very, very wrong here. But finally, Bob Wire said, yes, it seems like there's a problem here. Something is off about the way that this was reported. And throughout the year, not Bob, not the community, nobody noticed that this is impossible. But 2,500 citations, right? If you look at the replication reports, I don't know if you can read the meta-analysis, but this is the null effect. Confidence intervals, if they overlap with the null, there is no result. Look at all these labs. Most of them, aside from one, most of them overlap with the null, showing no effect. If it's 5.6, you should be able to detect this with any study that you run. But this is not the case here. So 0.8, 0.08, another 0.08 for a different outcome. So very, very small effect over here that doesn't seem to have any support for this. So this is inconsistent with Sewell and Wire, and we need to decrease our confidence in those. But if you think this killed the paper, it did not. People still kept doing social priming and using these kinds of procedures and publishing with this. Why? Because people said, no, you didn't do this right. Why? Because this was in the 1970s and now it's the 2000s. So you had to adjust this. You don't need a direct replication, you need a conceptual replication. Because I do a lot of replications and I submit this to journals, I get these kinds of feedback from reviewers all the time. So the same team said, okay, you know what? Fine, we'll do another one. Not only are we going to do direct replications, we're going to work with the priming literature people And we're also going to do a conceptual replication. This is what they found. The hostile priming effect for both the close replication and the conceptual replication is still 0.089, 0.05. Doesn't matter if you do this with a close replication or you do this with conceptual replication. Doesn't matter if you work with the priming literature people or you don't. You just don't find any effect. Can you see the waste here? Can you see how many people are involved? Each one of these labs is a few people. So many people need to come and revisit this. After a few decades of people working, just look at the sheer scale of the number of people that are in here just to revalidate and correct. Do you think that this stopped this work from being cited? I still get questions from HKU students saying, I'm planning to do a priming literature kind of study in my thesis, my undergraduate thesis, in my MPhil thesis, my PhD thesis. Such a waste, because we don't update our knowledge. We see something has been cited 2,500 times. We don't even check if there's a replication or not. So many people, so many resources invested in this. Summary of the issues: nobody noticed that there are errors. Nobody noticed that this is impossible. Throughout the people keep citing this. Then we have one replication. Nobody believes the first replication. They say we need to do another replication. So do another replication. Do both direct and conceptual. And only then we get to a point where we can say something about that. But still, people do keep doing research on social priming. A lot of other failed replication in priming, not just that article. A lot of articles in priming don't replicate. Hostility, honesty, intelligence, death, embodiment, a bunch of other things. Just like again and again, another disappointment. And people don't give up. Each one of these is millions of dollars invested in trying to replicate something that was published with small samples, with mistakes, with all sorts of other biases in the literature. I won't go into this. It's a big story. But if you think you're the only one who might make this kind of mistake, do you know who this guy is? The only psychologist to ever win the Nobel Prize in economics, Daniel Kahneman, did this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Are you familiar? Great book, very hard to read. I don't even understand how laypersons buy this and are able to survive the whole book. It was very, very difficult for me. Finally, in 2016, I got the audio version. The audio version came out, so I was like jogging in the gym, listening to this. First chapter, great. Second chapter, terrific. Fourth or fifth chapter, suddenly I had to stop, sit down, think to myself, what is going on over here? Because Daniel Kahneman is talking about priming as the future of judgment decision making. And for me, this is, oh my God, this is 2011, before the replication crisis, before all that. So Daniel Kahneman is the one who fell into this trap. Why is it important? So Daniel Kahneman fell into this trap. So what? This is what he wrote in 2012, a year after the book was published. He wrote, all I know, as far as I know, questions have been raised about the robustness of priming results. This seems to be like the poster child of everything that we do in psychology, because everybody is doing priming. When I was doing my PhD around 2011, everybody was doing priming all the time. I stopped after I failed a couple of times, saying, I don't understand how people do this. They're geniuses, and I'm incapable of doing good research. But all I have personally at stake is that I recently wrote a book that emphasizes priming research as a new approach to the study of judgment decision making. And Daniel Kahneman, count me as a general believer. And then he said, you have to solve this. You have to show me and the community that priming really works. I can see a train wreck looming. There's going to be a train crash happening if you don't solve this immediately. This is by a very big empirical person who does analyses. And he did an analysis on the chapter in Thinking Fast and Slow about priming. And he was reconstructing the train wreck, showing how each one of the articles that were cited in the book is problematic. Small samples, impossible effect sizes. A lot of problems in that chapter. So he published this on his blog. And the amazing thing is that Daniel Kahneman, above 80, I don't know how your grandparents are with technology, but he went on that blog. He found that blog and he wrote a comment. This is his comment. What the blog gets absolutely right is that I place too much faith in underpowered studies. Each one of these studies had 10, 20 in each condition. But there is special irony in my mistake, because the first paper that Amos Tversky and I published, one of the papers that led to them winning the Nobel Prize, is belief in the law of small numbers. They were going to statistician conferences, showing them results from small sample studies and asking them whether this seems to be solid or not, showing that even statisticians put too much faith in small samples. So he was going around the world warning everybody, be careful of small sample studies. But he's the one who actually fell into the exact same trap. So our article was written in 1969, published in 1971, but I failed to internalize its message. The person who has been studying this kind of bias fell into this bias in one of the most important books that we published in psychology. It's amazing because this example from the paper in 1969 is almost exactly like the priming studies results that we see. Very, very small samples. The effect size is just below 0.05. How many citations for this one? 4,200. And Daniel Kahneman fell into this trap. So if Daniel Kahneman can fall into this trap, so can we. At this point in time, usually I show you how to p-hack. It's an important skill for you to have, not so that you can publish p-hack papers, but in order to understand what p-hacking looks like. I don't know how much time we have, but it seems like it's too long for us to do this right now. So if you want, I show this kind of thing in my YouTube videos. It's very important that you open some of these links and that you try this for yourself in order to understand what is p-hacking. How do we get these impossible results? What does it mean to push a p-value? For example, in 2011, published in JPSP, one of our top journals in social psychology, a paper that said that people are capable of feeling the future. People react to stimuli that's going to happen a few milliseconds afterwards in the future. An impossible finding. Goes against everything that we know about the universe, but published in JPSP. 9 studies, 1,000 participants, amazing. How did he do this? Took us a very, very long time to figure out what was wrong in this. But he did optional stopping, and it turns out that if you do optional stopping, you bring in one participant, you run it, and then you look p-value lower than 0.05. Oh no, another participant, please. You open, another participant, please. You open, then to find the p-value lower than 0.05. Because every time that you peek into your results, you need to adjust the p-value. You need to account for this with your alpha. So now we know how to account for this with optional stopping. Back in 2011, we did not. And people understood that this is the way that you can get the p-value to be lower than 0.05 and get your paper published. What I am going to show you is p-checker. P-checker is a tool that allows you to summarize the literature. I encourage you, if you're doing your PhD or your MPhil thesis on something, and you think that the literature is solid, I encourage you, I urge you, take the main results from the articles that are the most important in your field and put those over here. There's actually a tool that allows you to extract all of these automatically, but what you can see over here is that you can put the T, the chi-square, the R, the F, whatever it is that's happening, and it will analyze this for you. So I'm going to show you this with a real demo. So for example, elderly priming. This is one of the first elderly priming, I think, which year was this? 1995 or something like this. John Barge showed that if you get people to unscramble sentences that have to do with elderly, then if you time their walks from the door to the elevator, they walk slower. We've tried to replicate this many times and we failed again and again. But if you look at this literature, somebody coded this for us. You can see the p-value is lower than 0.03, 0.01, and so forth. You have a lot of analyses over here. One of the first analyses that you should always do is stat check. Stat check actually checks the statistics in your article. So it takes the PDF, extracts all the values, and then checks whether the p-value is what it's supposed to be. So you can see over here that there's already some issues with the p-values. Sometimes it's something rather minor. So the p-value that was reported was 0.05, but actually the p-value is 0.43. So sometimes it's not critical, but in some literatures, this is going to showing you that there's a real problem. But it's already wonderful that there's a tool that allows you to do like spelling and grammar, but for statistics, to show you that whether there's a problem or not. Another thing that it does is an automatic meta-analysis. So hopefully you'll learn how to do meta-analysis. And what you can see over here is that it gives you an automatic funnel plot. I won't go into this in detail, but what I can tell you for sure is that over here we have very strong indications for a publication bias, because this is the triangle for the null effect for a 0. This is the triangle for, so an effect, let's say 0.5. And you can see that somebody did not publish anything that was higher than 0.05. So all the published findings are on this slope. So we have a very strong indication of a publication bias over here. We can also do a p-curve to see what is the status of the p-values. So if a phenomenon has some empirical evidence, the green one is what you should observe. A little bit, in 0.05, a little bit more in 0.04, a little bit more than that 0.03, but most of the findings should be lower than 0.01 and then exponentially rising. What you can see is the blue line for the priming, where you have most of the findings are just below 0.05, meaning that people are just like pushing the findings in order to just be below the threshold. And what you can see over here is an analysis. Does it have any evidential value? It does not. If there's evidential value, is it inadequate? Definitely inadequate. There's a very strong bias with the p-values over here. So run this in your literatures before you embark on a study to see whether your foundations are solid enough. These are tools that are now available that were not available to me in my PhD. So did John Barge learn something from this? Did the priming literature folks change something about drawing conclusions from this literature? No. So 2018, business as usual, John Barge comes out with a bestseller, New York Times bestseller. Before you know it, the unconscious reasons we do what we do. I don't have any way to describe this other than I'm very disappointed with us as a community that this is still going on. We have a responsibility to the taxpayers, to the community, to you, to report findings that are solid, replicable, reproducible. Questionable research practices, we have a lot of evidence for that. This is the latest 2020 in the Netherlands, the most comprehensive that I've seen. About 4.3% of researchers just report that they're doing fraud. 4.3 just outright say that they're doing fraud. It's anonymous, but if these are the ones that are saying that they're doing fraud, I think the rates are probably higher. How many people are doing questionable research practices, pushing the p-value to be lower than 0.05? 51.3%. In the Netherlands, which is considered to be the most advanced, the most adopting of open science practices. So this is in the Netherlands. How is it in here in Hong Kong? I don't know, but we should do some research on this to see what's happening. Let's say that there's something that's flawed, not just in psychology, but in other fields. How much does it take us to correct this? How many dollars? Some students say it's not a problem. If I do a little bit of massaging to my data and just push it below 0.05, I can publish my research, I can get my PhD. What is the worst that can happen? It can cost billions of dollars to correct a wrong finding. And here you can see a summary from Sanjay, $1 billion spent chasing a flashy, unreplicable finding. It's devastating. When I see this kind of thing, do you know what we could have done with $1 billion? What we could have invested this in? How many advances in science we could have done instead of chasing something that was wrong? Not even fraud, questionable research practices are sometimes not conscious. We are to blame for pushing you to endorse these kind of practices. So people who are doing this are just playing the systems. We've seen this clash between the incentives, what it is that you're promoted for, what it is that you're hired for, and what it is that's good for science. So this is what happens when we have things that is dependent on results, novelty. There's a competition. Profit is involved in this for the publishers. There's no transparency. Nobody has ever shared their data and their code. We just read these very vague articles about what they've done. We trust the researchers. So it's not evidence-based. It's not science. It's a trust system. And we failed. We failed this trust. They trusted us, and we did not deliver. So this is my generation, or the generation that came before me. But you have the ability to do things differently. You can deviate from what it is that you've inherited from us in order to do things differently. Can we get things back on track? This is my summary of the situation. It took me a long time to get here, but hopefully I've convinced you that there's something that needs to be paid attention to. Some people say, there is no crisis. We don't know what you're talking about. Some people also at HKU say, we've been doing this for 40 years. Things are working. Look, electricity, planes are flying. We even were able to address the pandemic. What are you talking about? I can debate these kind of things. We can have an entire conversation. But my main point is, even if you disagree with me on this, there's no good argument against open science. So for me, it's a little bit like with the climate change debate. So we're arguing for livable cities, clean water, clean air, healthy children. And then somebody gets up and says, but what if it's all a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? Let's just create a better world, for all of us, for the children, for our futures. Same with open science. We're talking about things like improving the use of statistics, preventing p-hacking, more transparency, opening up everything, going against the for-profit in order to have open access for everything. And then somebody comes up and says, but what if it's all a big hoax and we create a better science for nothing? Let's just create a better science, regardless of whether you're with me or not, regarding all the evidence that we have. We should all do better. You should all do better than we did. It's not just me saying this now. So luckily, finally, after a lot of effort, UNESCO got together and decided open science is the way to go. So it's not only a question of, is this gonna happen, open science or not? By the time that you finish your MPhil, PhD, get into the job market, if you plan to stay in academia, but regardless, whatever it is that you do, even in industry, open science is going to be a fact. I was worried 5 years ago that maybe it will disappear, but no longer the case. March this year, global call for best practices of open science, and people listen. They don't listen to me in the open science movement. They listen to UNESCO, and UNESCO, big funders around the world are now paying attention and are calling for open science. So if you don't know, if your advisor is not talking to you about open science, you go and you do the research in order to make sure that by the time that you're on the job market, you've adhered to what is expected right now in the world. How to do this? I'm going to go over very, very briefly two main solutions. This is my argument. Registered reports are the future of science. I don't know why at HKU we don't promote this more. I feel like this should be the default of the way that we do confirmatory research. I give a workshop, 3 hours. I'm happy to sit with any one of you to discuss how to do registered reports. We have guides, templates, videos, whatever it is that you need, there's a way for us to support you. Started in 2013 by Chris Chambers, who really revolutionized the field and wanted to do things differently. And the thing is that, I'll just go here, this is the current model, which is broken. So you do everything, very high investment, very high risk. You develop the idea, you design the study, you collect and analyze, you write the report, and then you submit this to the journal, hoping that the reviewers like your result. If they don't like your result or they don't like something about this, they say, reject, go and do another study. And then either you try another journal or you go and run another study. This is a broken system. Registered report has 2 stages. The first stage is stage 1 peer review, and this happens about your pre-registration. So you write a plan, everything that you want to do. You take that plan and you submit that to the journal. So there's no results, there's no outcome. Nobody's going to judge you based on whatever outcome it is that's going to happen in the future. Only going to judge you based on the plan. And not only this, but rather than judging you, they're going to help you. So finally, instead of saying no, 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 you're going to say, here's my suggestion on how you can do better. So it's a community working together in order for authors and reviewers to get to the best science possible. Once you agree that this is solid methods to investigate the research hypothesis, then they grant you what is called an in-principle acceptance. In-principle acceptance means it doesn't matter what the outcome is. P-value is not lower than 0.05, no problem, still published. So guaranteed publication just based on your pre-registration. So in the first stage, they ask you, or they look at what it is that you submitted. Are your hypotheses well-founded? Are the results and the analysis that you propose, are they solid? Is this well-powered to ensure that really you've done a good job at planning this? And if not, they give you a revision. You just correct this, and then you put this again, and then you get an acceptance. Stage 2, the only thing that reviewers do in stage 2 is see that you adhered to your plan in stage 1. No new comments, no outcome-based reject, nothing like that. Just that you adhered, or it's not a prison, it's a plan. So if you deviated, that it's well justified that you deviated. Because sometimes you find out things after you collected the data, but you carefully document, I planned this, but what I ran was this. And these are the implications. So everything is transparent about comparison between the plan and the outcome. So at the beginning, we had this kind of model with everything is broken. But after the registered report, it just takes care of all of this because there is no publication bias. The samples are large. The methods are solid. There's an agreement between the authors and the community about everything that's done in this model. It started in 2013 with 3. Now there's over 300 journals that do registered reports. Many of them are in psychology. Chris Chambers started in neuroscience. Neuroscience is actually one of the first to implement this, but it doesn't matter what you do, educational, developmental, definitely social psychology, you'll find a journal that does this. This is based on this is how I treat science that I read right now. So the base pyramid is from Chris Chambers, and then I added 2 more layers on the top. So these big things, the green ones are mine. Status quo research, when I read stuff, great priming research from the 1980s, I think it's barely worth a mention. It's anecdotal. I don't know what to do with it. Definitely don't plan any policy. Don't plan your thesis on this. It's a waste of your time. It's not worth it. Exploratory open science, it's okay, where you have your data and materials, so you can check what they've done, that there are no mistakes, that they've done everything solid. So having open science is already something good. Confirmatory means that it was pre-registered. So this you can compare the plan with the outcome. That's 1 layer up. And then at the top of this is a registered report. So now when I try to plan my research, first I look, is there a registered report? Did somebody do this the right way without any bias? If there isn't, I run the replication registered report. And I think in a decade, we'll have, so Chris Chambers is saying the best evidence that we should do policy is a meta-analysis of registered reports. And I'm saying, and I'm trying to promote, that we also should do the meta-analysis as a registered report. So we should do a registered report meta-analysis of registered reports. And we are doing quite a few of those here at HKU in my lab. So this is kind of like the pyramid of evidence that I teach my students and that I try to follow. So reproducible, transparent, credible. Nice thing about this is that some people are worried, but this seems like a lot of investment just on the pre-registration. Having the peer review and pre-registration, it's going to delay my MPhil. It's going to get me to not in time for the job market. But actually, the amazing thing about this is that if you think about this, if you only submit the pre-registration plan and you get constructive advice, actually rejection rates go down from about 80, 90% to 10%. Rejection rates for registered reports are about 10%. Why? There's no reason to reject you if you can actually fix it. So you work together. So it's much better for you because you increase the chances of you getting into the first journal that you submit to, getting real, good, constructive feedback on your research, rather than I'm the #1 expert in the world on this. There are other people who can contribute to this. So it's much more likely to get accepted. And then registered reports are better cited just because they're more credible research. The first MPhil that I had, who is now a PhD in Vienna, tried this with me. And within his first year of MPhil, he was able to complete the registered report. So it takes a year. He was able to do this. And finally, when he got to his MPhil defense, there's nothing to defend because this was accepted as a registered report. What kind of comments can you possibly say as a second examiner? This has already been accredited by the community. A lot of things about this in the Twitter sphere. Is there some evidence for registered reports doing better and addressing bias? Definitely. So in standard reports, you have 90-something% of p-value lower than 0.05 supported, because this we have to impress. Everything else gets rejected. Registered report, it's closer to what reality is. You know, this seems a lot more manageable. This is a randomized controlled trial of registered reports where they got people to either do registered reports or not registered reports, and then just comparing the quality. So when it comes to methods rigor, analysis rigor, and overall quality of the paper, registered reports were just by experts coded as being much higher rigor and quality. I've done a few registered reports. So this is, for example, Krishna Savani. He just joined PolyU as a full professor at the business school. So we've done this in the Journal of Research in Personality, very nice registered report meta-analysis. I asked him to write some comments for you to get his advice. And he says, I'll summarize this because there's a lot of things. He saw this as a very rewarding research experience. He's an editor in JPSP. And he said this was by far the most rewarding research experience that he has ever had in his career. And there's clarity, you know, don't need to second guess. You know exactly what's expected of you. This is from Chinyu, who is now in Vienna. This is what we published in his MPhil work. So this is what he wrote. I'll summarize this for you. Reduces uncertainty, more confidence, peace of mind, saves time. Doesn't cost you time. Even more than this, especially recommended for you, for early career researchers and research postgraduate. Reviewers contribute rather than being against you, they're with you. This is about registered reports. This year, we ran an amazing proof of concept. I've done this with all my thesis students, and I'm talking about undergraduates. So all of the undergraduates and the masters working with me submitted their thesis as a registered reports to this new initiative called Peer Community in Registered Reports, which is considered to be Registered Reports 2.0. It's an amazing initiative that is completely revolutionizing science, and I think this is where we should all be going. Peer Community in Registered Report is a nonprofit, non-commercial, free, researcher-run suprajournal platform for conducting journal-style peer review of registered reports in all fields. It doesn't matter what field you are. They're going to look at your research. This is what it does. A lot of benefits, amazing sort of things, but I'm going to touch on the things that might relate to you the most. And this is how I was able to accomplish this within 1 year, even with undergraduate with a very tight thesis schedule. They guarantee peer review within 2 weeks. Amazing. Never seen anything like this in my entire academic career. How do they do this magic? 6 weeks before you're going to submit, you send to them what's called a snapshot or 1 page saying, this is my hypothesis, this is how I'm going to do this. And they take this and look for reviewers while you work. I work with my students, they go look for reviewers, and you all aim for exactly the same date. You submit on that date, and the reviewers have to turn in the reviews within 2 weeks. In the beginning, I had doubts, I admit, never seen something like this, but all of them, and we've submitted 17, all of them got back within 2 weeks. So they deliver, they really do this. What is more amazing than this is that this is run by the community. So this is not a for-profit publisher. The community are the ones that are doing this. And once the community gives you an in-principle acceptance, you can go to any one of the journals that are supporting this platform, and immediately they will publish this with no additional peer review. So instead of the publisher having all the power, you have the power. So the community are the ones that are certifying what it is that you do, and you are the ones that can decide where you want to go. So let's say that you really care about nature-human behavior, because this is the one that HKU cares about, and nature-human behavior supports peer community and registered report. You can go to them and say, I really would like to publish this with you because I've done amazing research and the community has already certified this, but I can't do the 9,500 euros, 11,000 US dollars. But I can go to any other journal. You want this? Waive the fees. So all the power is within you. You are the one that is in control. But you can choose. So This is an amazing achievement. 2 weeks, everything is done on preprints. Everything is shared. The peer review is shared in public and has a DOI that is citable. So if you're a reviewer for the community, you can put this on your CV. It's citable, so forth. These are all the ones that we've done. So all my students are here. Received in-principle acceptance from the community, and Collabora Psychology contacted us saying, we saw that you got in-principle acceptance from peer community. Can we get your research to publish with Collabora? And then I said, yes, I would love to. So all of those are published, open access with Collabora Psychology after we got the approval from the community. So it's amazing. We've submitted 17, we got 17 revised and resubmit, 9 in-principle acceptance, and now we're doing the stage 2. Everything is just an amazing accomplishment by the students. This is what it looks like on the platform. So you can see the recommender. This is Chris Chambers. Chris Chambers is the recommender, the editor on all of our submissions. He thought that this is really important to show that undergraduate and masters can do good, solid register report research. So it's amazing that he took it upon himself. And then he wrote this recommendation. So for example, Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in 2017, we did a replication of one of his major findings. And then Chris Chambers wrote this, that we wanted to replicate 17 of the influentials. And then you can see the peer review. Who did the peer review, on what date, and everything is open for everybody to see. So you don't need to guess. There's no trust system. You see everything that happened about the process. This is what it looks like on the Open Science Framework. So you can see how we responded to the reviewers. You can see the supplementary, the main manuscript, everything is shared here, including power analysis, effect size, Qualtrics, simulated data. We simulate data in Qualtrics and do the data analysis based on that. So it's quite amazing to be part of this process. These are some of the Twitter responses that I got to how do you feel about peer community and register report? And everybody feels very, very positive. I encourage you to go and talk to my students. How did it feel to do this? Feels revolutionary, especially for me who's been stuck in that system, the broken system for so long. This is liberating. If you want to know more, lots of talks by the people in peer community and register reports. Chris Chambers is here, a few of the other folks, some articles if you want to know more about this. So I really think that this is hopeful for us. So lots of things about the current system are broken, but there is a way for us to get out of this. Register reports, peer community and register report, completely open, completely transparent, no publishers, no for-profit, all accessible to you. This is where science should go. And I really encourage you and invite you that if you want to be part of this science reform, if you want to have credible, trustworthy research that others can build on, that has a real impact for taxpayers who are funding you, and please consider these directions. One last thing I'm going to say, it's only for this year, so hopefully not too late for you, but if you want this, come talk to me. Last year, I received funding from the Teaching Development Grant that is applicable to anybody who wants to work with us. So if judgment decision-making or social psychology is interesting for you, and you want to do register reports, if you do register reports and get in-principle acceptance, I will collect data for you up to 8,000 Hong Kong dollars, so 1,000 US dollars. So I can fund up to 30 students. Until now, the last year, I've funded 15. Most of them are mine, some of them are by my colleagues. But there's room for you to come in and use this funding. So if you submit peer community and register reports, you can get in-principle acceptance. If you need online data collection, if it's in the field of social psychology or judgment decision-making, I will conduct the data collection for you up to 8,000 Hong Kong dollars. So if you worry, where am I going to get a sample? How am I going to recruit participants? What can I do? You'll benefit from doing things right. Plus, I will cover your data collection costs. So we got this funding until the end of the next academic year, so a year from now. So you're very welcome to come and use this. If you want to know more about how to do this, there's a talk that you can watch or write to me, ask me. We can schedule an appointment and I can guide you in this. But if for some reason you have something on your mind that prevents you from doing this, I will probably have a solution for you. So everything that I've discussed today is on my website. All that I've done with my students, everything that I do about open science, meta research, Everything is available on the website, so you can scan this or go on the website. You can contact me directly if you have questions. I'm very active on Twitter, so you can see some of the discussions that I have with others in the open science community. Xiaoqing is also there. There's a mailing list about all the activities, the workshops, and there's also the YouTube channel if you want to see some of the videos. I also share my teaching, all the workshops. So there's lots of materials for you if you want to know more. I'll be very happy to try and help you as you start your academic career, your studies, to do better and to implement open science to do trustworthy research. So that's it for me. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. First of all, if you got the in-principle acceptance and you ran the study as intended, so you did not deviate in something that is very meaningful, first of all, you should follow up and write your results. Whatever the results are, if you found support or didn't find support, the community needs to know about that. One of the things that were introduced in peer community in registered report is that you can do a registered report program. So let's say that study 1 is a pretest. So you can say, I want a registered report program where I'm doing study 1 pretest, and then after, based on the results of the first study, I will do another study. So peer community and registered report supports that. So you can say, depending on what the results are going to be, I'm going to plan study 3. If you have 2 different studies, study 1 and study 2, and something about them does not match, that's completely okay, because the main point in registered report is just to be transparent. We need to understand that science is messy. Not everything works out. Sometimes it's good that something doesn't work out because we learned something new. Perhaps we've done this. We've actually taken one article that had 2 studies, and we've done 2 replications of each one of these studies. And then we realized that the 2 replications of study 1 were consistent, the 2 replications of study 2 were consistent, but the findings were completely opposite. And this is from the same article. What to do about this? You transparently report this. You try to interpret this, and then based on this, you plan another registered report to try and see how you can solve this mystery. But whatever the results are, we need to know, because something over there needs to be figured out. So all of that can be done within registered reports. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Yes? Yeah, I'm glad that you asked this because we really care about this, and we actually have some solutions for you. So some of the people in my team know, I think he's a PhD student at Chinese University of Hong Kong, and another. So we have over here meta-analysis registered reports. So you can go and have a look at this. So first, of course, systematic reviews and meta-analysis are not the same thing. Meta-analysis falls under the umbrella of systematic reviews because it offers you a quantitative analysis of a literature. But for both of those, I have a solution. First of all, there's a workshop that I gave. I'm hoping to do the same workshop in the upcoming years. So you can have a look at my workshop or Adrian's workshop on how to do this reproducible. If you're doing an experimental meta-analysis, there's a registered report template. I'll just show you what that looks like. Actually, maybe I'll open this. Yeah, so you have one for experimental meta-analysis, and you have one for correlational meta-analysis. And actually, we wrote the manuscript for you. So the template is very elaborate in everything that it needs to have. So how to write the abstract, how to write the literature review, the methods, the screening, the coding. We even have like a coding sheet for you. So if you want to know how to do an optimal open science kind of coding sheet, then there's you'll see here that we offer this for you, plus together with the RR Markdown code that will analyze this for you. And we have some examples on how to simulate the data for that. But this is for a meta-analysis. Let's say that you want to do a systematic review. So we joined with these initiatives. So non-interventional reproducible open evidence synthesis. And over here, you have this open systematic review guidelines. So there's quite a few teams that are tackling exactly that question. And they will give you all kinds of case studies of what happens when there's 2 coders that disagree. And everything that you do is completely okay, as long as you plan this in advance. So you can say, if there is a disagreement between coder A and coder B, this is when the coder 3 will come in, and he will judge or she will judge based on criteria A, B, C, D. So we try and in advance tackle every possible aspect of what might happen or go wrong in a systematic review. There's lots of things that you don't anticipate in advance, which is why it's very important for you to use these kinds of templates. So we work on this together, people who know systematic review, who know meta-analysis. One more thing I want to show you, it's also here, is this collaborative meta-analysis syllabus that actually also tackles the systematic reviews. So there's a lot of stuff in here on how to do systematic reviews, how to do meta-analyses, planning, search, coding, estimating. So together as a community, the open science community worked on a syllabus on what are the best practices for doing a reproducible open science systematic review or meta-analysis. If you have more specific questions, you can contact me and I'll show you what is the right resource. Good question, thank you. I saw some other, yes? Yeah, that's a good, yeah, why don't they change? So they see what we see, hopefully. Why don't they adopt open science practices? So some of them do. It's a slow change, but some of them do. For example, of the Nature conglomerate, Nature Springer, Nature Human Behavior has adopted register reports and peer community in register report and doing all sorts of things about open science. They seem to care about this, especially now that they're understanding that UNESCO and big funders are promoting this, but some don't. Just yesterday, I got an email from Psychological Science, where the editor is trying to promote having open science advisors that will look over your code, will make sure that you're doing register reports. Accordingly, she did an amazing editorial saying that Psychological Science, which is part of Sage Publishing, is trying to adopt as much as possible. However, they're not adopting registered reports broadly. They're only adopting registered reports for replications. And I was asking her, why? Please consider peer community and registered reports. Because high impact factor journals like Psychological Science want to see the results before they make a decision. They want to ensure that this will have the right impact. It's not, there's all sorts of problems about this, but I can understand that they want to have the biggest boom that they can in the media. They want to increase the level of citations. They depend on this, for all sorts of things. They want to maintain their impact. And what can we do? Null findings are not as exciting as finding something. So I think they want to optimize the kind of return on investment for their stakeholders, right? I don't completely understand this because I feel that this is a very biased, but hopefully with time they'll endorse this. What happened in the last 10 years is a revolution. What you have right now was not available for me when I was a PhD student, but it is happening now and it's growing. I think now there's no going back to this. Plus, unfortunately, the promotion system, the funding system, try to get a research grant from the Hong Kong government for registered reports or open science. I've tried many times and failed. So they have a very specific way of doing things. To change things at that level takes a very, very long time. They first want to see that others are doing this, and then they want to follow in their footsteps. They need more evidence. What I showed to you is not sufficient for them. So there's lots of barriers to that. But at the end, I think there's no way of, it's going to happen. 5-10 years, this is the way to go. It's slow change. Change is difficult. Changing people, we know this in psychology. Changing behavior, especially of a group of people, something that is status quo bias, so inherent, so fundamental. All the senior people have survived the system. Why would you get to play in a different system? That's how it is. Yes? Once you received an in-principle, good question. So once you received an in-principle acceptance, you're supposed to follow that plan. Any changes that you want to do to that plan, you will need to check with the editor. If it's something very, very minor, the editor might say no problem, but if it's something that doesn't seem minor, that might affect the results, you will need to go through another round with the reviewers to make sure that the adjustment is valid. What I was referring to is deviations in other aspects that are unexpected. So for example, you ran a study, I run a lot of studies online. But suddenly there's a pandemic, and then some people are distracted, or some people, don't pass a certain threshold that you said for this question. Something has changed in the parameters of how you were planning to do this, but you didn't know this coming in. You just see this after you looked at the data. Then you would have to explain, this is what I noticed. This is not what we were planning for. Therefore, we will need to do additional analysis. So this is what we ran. And the rationale for that is pandemic or something changed. And then you and the reviewers and the editor need to make sure that this is justifiable. And so, sometimes, very rare occasions, if something is very, very fundamental that has changed, might need the second data collection. But most of the times when you have an in-principle acceptance, if you justify this and show what it is that you've added, how you deviated, what is it that's different from the plan, most of the time it's going to be accepted because we understand that reality changes and there are things that will need to be adjusted. Most of the times it's adding exploratory analyses, and then you just need to differentiate them from the confirmatory, so what was pre-registered and what was added. And then all sorts of adjustments for things that you didn't expect. You try to add as much as possible in the pre-registration plan, but you can't account for everything. Sometimes you only, after you see the data, can you know what it is that you have to do. But yeah, it's the most important thing is just be transparent. Just don't hide anything, put it out there, explain what it is that you noticed, and then explain what it is that you decided to do about it. Yeah? Okay, terrific. Thank you.